Good morning, students. Welcome to this course on consumer psychology. And this lecture is the first in the series of this course. Now, as I have already explained on the introductory video, that the course is comprised of 20 different lectures, and within these lectures, we'll be moving through various aspects of consumer psychology. Now, since this particular lecture is the first lecture in this series of the 20 lectures that I'm going to conduct on consumer psychology, in this particular lecture, what I'm trying to do is trying to introduce you with the science of consumer behavior and consumer psychology. What is it that we study in consumer behavior? What are the methods of studying consumer behavior? What are the basic properties of consumer behavior, the various elements of consumer behavior, and so we'll be deciphering this one by one in this particular lecture and in the next upcoming lecture. So, what is consumer behavior? The whole statement is made up of two parts. It says consumer and something called behavior. Now, consumer is anybody who buys anything from the market or consumes anything from the market, and that's what a consumer is. And behavior is a psychological aspect, which is basically response that people give to particular kind of stimulus. So, how do they respond to particular kind of consumption or particular kind of marketing stimuli? So, basically in this particular lecture, we are going to undertake the journey of understanding what consumer behavior is all about. So, first thing first, let's start with a scenario. Let's try and understand what consumers are and what consumer behavior is, and for that, let's build up a story. Let's assume that the smartphone that you have been using for the past 4 months or 4 years is actually dying, and so you are in the need of buying a new cell phone. So, basically the idea of buying a new cell phone has a lot of implications, and so when you go to buy this cell phone, which is a product in the market, you actually become a consumer. So, you act as a consumer in the sense that you are going to buy a product and get benefits out of it. So, basically how do you go ahead and buy this cell phone? What are the motives of buying the cell phone? What are the various factors which influence you into buying the cell phone? And the company which is selling the cell phone to you, what should it do, or how should it study consumers like you so that they can make up a product which matches your expectations? So, how do you actually buy a cell phone? For example, you go to the market, your cell phone is dying, so you look up to the market. So, there will be several factors which decide how you buy the new phone. One of the factors which basically should be involved is what is the use of the cell phone for you. So, the new smartphone that you are looking at, new smartphone which you are thinking of buying is, what is the use of this phone for you. So, whether you use this phone primarily for just calling or texting, or do you use it for other purposes like going on to social networking websites, or maybe you use this phone for some other purposes, for example, reading text online, going online and doing certain kind of works, or maybe editing certain PowerPoints or some other way. So, there could be several functions of why you need a cell phone. So, people who would be only texting and calling would be looking for not a smartphone but a basic phone, and the people who would like to go online and do several kind of social networkings or other works from it will look for a smartphone with these features on. So, this is one basic thing. The other thing that will decide of how you buy a cell phone is basically what are you wanting in the cell phone. So, basically in terms of what is the hardware. So, depending on your use, you will decide the hardware. So, if you are one of those people who actually uses a cell phone for a longer period of time, you stay online for a longer period of time, you have an active social life. So, you will be looking for a smartphone which is easier to use in terms of the software, in terms of the interfaces, in terms of the battery life, and so many other things. So, that will also decide of how you buy a cell phone. Other factors which might influence of how you buy a cell phone would be where do you go to buy this particular thing. So, whether you are buying it online, whether you are buying it through a store, whether you are buying it from the store next door, or wherever you are buying it, or is it coming as a gift, and so many other things are also involved in buying this particular cell phone. And with this, another factor, personal factors which are involved in buying this cell phone could be how much money you have, how much money you can spend, and so on and so forth. So, basically the story that I gave to you. And so what you do is you look into the pluses and minuses of all of these factors, add them together, and finally decide to buy a cell phone of a particular company, and you go ahead and buy the cell phone, and then you get satisfied with it or dissatisfied with it. Based on that, whether if you get satisfied, you would maybe buy the cell phone again, or if you are dissatisfied, you will change a brand. So, this simple act of buying a cell phone is a complex decision, and this is what most consumers have to go through every day. It's basically deciding between what to choose. And so, since the number of alternatives which are available, the number of products which are available in the market is huge, consumer behavior is actually the study of how consumers behave in the market, how consumers actually go and make the final purchase decision. And an integral part of this is studying the complex decision process, or the decision making process of how consumers choose between products. Now, courses on consumer behavior or consumer dynamics or consumer psychology would focus on this particular aspect from several different viewpoints. Now, one viewpoint could be the marketer's viewpoint, where I am looking for those facts, or where I am trying to study those facts which is interested for a marketer. For example, how should the product placement be, where should the product be, which market should I launch the product, what are the qualities of the product, and so on and so forth. The study of consumer behavior can also be looked into, or can also be made from a consumer standpoint, and this standpoint basically requires us to understand the psychology of the consumer. Now, those factors which are inherent in the consumers, and how do they go about, or what are the factors, how do they play about in making this purchase or making consumer purchases into the market. So, basically this course in consumer psychology will be focusing on consumer factors. So, we will look at all those consumer factors which play major role into how consumers actually go into the marketplace, make a particular purchase, get satisfied or dissatisfied with it, and finally decide to either buy it, stick with that particular product, or make a different choice. Now, all this buying process, all this process of consuming things or buying things actually happen because there is a need generated in the consumer. Now, this need generation can be actually a real need where the consumer is really thinking of buying it, or the need that is generated in the consumer can be an aesthetic need where he is just buying for something for just the purpose of, or just for the entertainment purpose, or just for a feeling of pleasure purpose. And so, when consumers buy a good for its retail value, for its utilitarian value, which basically means that if I am buying a cell phone, I am buying it basically for purpose of using it as a cell phone, which basically means making calls and writing text. Or I could be buying a cell phone for its aesthetic value, which means that the cell phone purchase is because of its design, because of its other features which are not related to the core feature of calling. So, basically most cell phones can call, so why do people buy different phones, right? Why not stick with one? So, basically there are different needs, and this need generation is actually the first step in making consumer buy a product. So, this journey of consumer psychology, the course on consumer psychology, we will look into consumer factors which will affect this decision of the consumer to how to buy a product and why to buy a product. And so, these factors could be the consumer memory, the consumer learning, it could be things like consumer motivation and emotions, it could be things like consumer attitude, and so many other psychological variables or time pressure, and so many other psychological variables which will be acting all together and then deciding how a consumer makes the final purchase. So, let us then start with this section on an overview of the consumer behavior, where we try to study what consumer behavior is actually, and then later on we will study those psychological factors or psychological variables which affect the purchase of a product or the behavior of a consumer. So, any consumer, anyone who goes into the marketplace and makes a purchase can be defined under, or can be put under three different categories. We have the shopper, we have the buyer, and we have the consumer benefit. So, basically three type of people any consumer can be classified into three type of categories. One is the shopper, the one who does the shopping, the other is the buyer, and the third is the consumer. So before going into understanding these three kinds of categories, let's first look at why do people shop. Why do people actually buy things or consume things? And the underlying fact, or the most important fact on which the study of consumer behavior or any course on consumer behavior runs, is that people in the market don't buy products, but what they tend to buy is benefits from products. And that is the first line that I have written here. So people in the market, in the consumer market, they do not buy products. People are not in the market for buying things. When you're buying a cell phone, you're not buying the cell phone, but what you're trying to buy is actually the benefit that you get of the cell phone. And these benefits that people obtain from products is actually practical, and it could be a practical benefit or it could be a unusual benefit. So I'll explain this practical and unusual benefit in a minute, but this part, this particular sentence is something which you should remember or you should fixate on. So people in the market are not interested in products, rather they are interested in the benefits that they get out of the product. So if you're buying anything, it is the benefit that decides or that makes you make the purchase. Now what is a practical benefit? Let's say I want to buy a cell phone. What is the practical benefit of buying a cell phone? The practical benefit, it is going to give you the mobility or the chance to make calls and make messages and connect with people that you know or different people around you. And what is the unusual benefit? So practical benefit is the core benefit that you get out of a cell phone, which is basically texting, going online and doing all kind of stuffs. And the unusual benefit that you're going to get out of a cell phone is the feeling of pleasure out of holding the phone, or the feeling of pride of buying a particular cell phone. So most people who buy an Apple phone, the reason could be a practical reason where they believe that Apple has a good interface or a good memory. But then if we do an actual comparison of what an Apple has and what other phones have, we find that there are several other phones in the same, with a lower price bracket that Apple offers, and have very good hardware. So most people, I'm not making this as a statement and I'm not making any claims, but most people who tend to be Apple fans or which call themselves Apple fans is because they feel proud to be in the club, right? So all those advertisements which says you are in a Harley Davidson club, or most advertisements like you belong to Mahindra and Mahindra club benefits, and all those kind of advertisements basically focus on to the unusual benefits that you got out of products. The unusual benefits are the feeling of pleasure, the feeling of joy, the feeling of superiority over others, and these are the unusual benefits that you get out of a product. So two benefits that can come out of a product: the usual one, which is the core benefit, and the unusual one, which is the feelings, the psychological feeling that you get out of making or buying that particular product. Now, as I explained before, any person who goes into the market for buying, any individual who goes into the market for buying because he has a need has arisen in him, can be categorized as something called a shopper, something called a buyer, or something called a consumer. And what is the difference between them? Now, shoppers are those people who actually go into the market, who physically go into the market, and through various means they might either be looking at a product or they might buy a product. So shoppers are those people who actually venture into the market and through different, maybe it's an online market, maybe it is an offline market, maybe it is some other kind of market which is there. So they are just there for a particular purpose. So shoppers are those people who actually venture into the market and interact with the product or interact with the experience of the product. Who are the buyers? Buyers are those people who complete the exchange transactions. So what does it really mean? So people who go into the market and look at different products and are there for a particular purpose and interact with them are shoppers. But when the same shopper actually gives in money or actually parts with money and buys that particular product, he becomes a buyer. So shoppers are people going into the market and just doing window shopping or just looking around. But buyers are those people, and the same shopper becomes a buyer, or buyers are those people who actually go into the market and finish a transaction in terms of buying the product. And so this is the slight difference between what a shopper and buyer is. And the third category here is called the consumer. And so that is what I have written. The shopper is often the buyer, but not always. And there will be times when the shopper is not actually the buyer. So it may be possible that a small child, he likes toys, so he goes into the mall, he looks around, finds a particular toy, but of course he doesn't have that much money to buy the particular toy. So later on he calls his father and mother, who later on at some other point of time go into the market and buy that particular toy for this particular child. Now in terms of looking around, interacting with the product and deciding on the product, the shopper in this case is the child, whereas the buyer in this case, who actually pays the money and buys the product, is the parent. And so here the shopper and buyers are different. But in most cases, the person who looks around, who interacts with the products, who goes to the market turns out to be the buyer. Who are the consumers? The consumers are the people who actually use the product or possess the product which has been brought from the market. And so it is also possible that the consumer may be an entirely different people or entirely different person. Generically speaking, a shopper turns out to be a buyer and also turns out to be a consumer. But there are situations in which consumers might be entirely different from the shoppers and buyers. For example, think about gift giving. Now if you are giving a gift to someone, you are the shopper and you are the buyer. But once you shop particular thing and buy particular thing, you are not the one who actually possesses these things. You gift it to someone else who actually on the other end goes ahead and uses this product. And so he becomes the buyer of the product or the consumer of the product. So you are the shopper and the buyer, and the consumer is the third person to which you give the gift. And so in this case, the shopper, buyer and consumer might be different. But in most generic cases, the shopper turns out to be the buyer and the buyer turns out to be the consumer. So you going into the market for buying a cell phone, paying money into the market, buying that particular cell phone, and then later on using this cell phone is actually an example of where the shopper is the buyer and the buyer is the consumer. So this is the distinction between three different roles that any individual can play in the market, as the role of a shopper, the role of a buyer and the role of a consumer. Now, when you are doing a marketing, when you are into the market and buying products, there can be several influencers which exert the various level of power over a choice, and in due course of time we will look into these influencers. There can be influences like, for example, sale. Now, when you go into a market, a very good influencer for you to make a purchase is sale. So some companies announces a sale, and so even if you do not have a need of that particular product, people hoard things, and that's the nature of consumers. So basically you go into the market, tomorrow you are venturing into, let's say, big bazaar, and then once you suddenly see that there is a sale for a particular thing, or one thing comes as a gift to another thing, or added on, or less price, or there is a sale for something, what you tend to do is buy excess of that product. And so this particular thing, the use of sale or reducing prices or some other situational factors or other factors can help you make a purchase and can help you actually turn from a shopper to a buyer and a consumer. And these factors are called influences. So there are several influences into the market, and we will see how these influences really work. So influences is one another factor which has a lot of power, and it can make a person choose between a particular kind of the product. Now the benefits that people buy from a product, the benefits that people are looking from the product are different. So different people, when they go into the market, they actually look for different benefits, and that is why there are so many choices. Why is it that we don't have just one product in the market? Why are the number of alternatives or choices which are different in the market? Now the choices are different in the market. The reason for that being there is that because different people require different benefits. For example, let's look at the process of buying a particular item which is called the watch. Now for a student, the benefit that he wants to desire out of the watch is basically timekeeping. He wants to buy the watch because he wants to know the time, or it could be setting time for getting up early in the morning for studying and some other purpose. But the same watch, when it is given as a gift to someone on an anniversary or a birthday or something, some other occasions, that particular watch serves a different purpose, because at times it never comes out of its packaging. It remains in its mint condition because it's a gift, and so people don't take it out. And so in one case, the benefit that the student takes out of the watch is basically timekeeping, whereas in the other case, in the gift giving scenario, the watch offers a different benefit altogether, which is the possession, the feeling of possession of this particular watch, or the heightened feeling of the benefit that you get because of owning that particular brand. So different people look for different benefits, and this is the reason why in the market is so diverse, the consumer market is so diverse, and there are so many choices out there. Now, what is a marketplace now? So let's define a marketplace. So what we understood is there are three types of people. The individual who goes into the market can have three roles to play into it, and once he goes into the market, he gets influenced by so many factors. Now the thing is that there are so many choices in the market. The reason for different choices is because people have different desires or different desire for benefits from the products, and that is why there are so many choices onto the market. So the same product can be offered or may offer different benefits for different consumers, and that is why the choices are there into the particular market. Now, where do these consumers actually go to buy a particular product? And the place that these consumers actually go to buy a particular product is called the marketplace. So any place or any space where a consumer goes ahead and completes the transaction of buying a particular product is called a marketplace. Now, the reason why I define marketplace as a space, as a three-dimensional space, is because it could be a real space or it could be a virtual space. Now, at times the marketplace is the marketplace in its physical sense, for example, going to a showroom or going to a particular retail outlet or going to a particular superstore, retail store, and so on and so forth. And so in these cases, what really happens is the marketplace is a physical object. There are times when you actually purchase things online, and in this case the physicalness, the physical aspect of the marketplace disappears and the marketplace becomes a virtual place. So the idea of Amazon introducing the idea of a bookstore, or how did Amazon come about the idea of a bookstore, is a great example here. Now, the thing is, Amazon was looking for selling the books, and so what they did, they were the pioneers in this. Jeff Bezos was the pioneer in this, and so he designed a virtual marketplace where people can feel the same way as they actually feel while going into the market. And so, although in the present day Amazon sells a lot of products, but initially Amazon was for books, and so it looked like a virtual bookstore. If you look at the design of an Amazon or the old days Amazon, it actually looked like a marketplace, in the sense that you have different sections just like you have in a bookstore. And so when you go into fiction, you will find books on fictions, and they've been labeled from A to Z and so on and so forth, from fiction to some other place to some other place to some other romance to fiction to war stories to children's stories and so on and so forth. And so this is how they designed this actual store into the virtual world, which is called a virtual store. And so basically that became the marketplace. So marketplace is somewhere where a consumer actually goes ahead and makes the transactions, or actually finishes the transactions and buys the product. Now, the benefits that any consumer gets out of a product can be both tangible and intangible in nature. So the first thing that I define in this particular section is that people derive benefits from products, and what I would like to add here is that the benefits that people get out of products are both tangible and intangible in nature. So what are the tangible benefits? Tangible benefits has some sense of measure. Now, those benefits that you can measure, for example, you buy a laptop. Now, when you buy a laptop, it helps you in doing your work. It has a a particular RAM size, it has a particular disk space, it has a particular bright LED size, or the easiness it is making you to work around, and all those things that you get, the product in itself that you get, all those things that can be measured as a benefit are tangible benefits. What are the intangible benefits? Now, these are associated with feelings experienced when knowing a particular product or service. Now, intangible benefits are indirect benefits that you get out of a product, and so this can be the feelings of possessing a product. So, the next time you buy a laptop, the moment you buy an Apple laptop, the proudness that you feel by carrying it, the proudness that you feel when opening it in front of everyone is the intangible benefit that you are getting. Or the proudness that you feel when you receive an email from Apple saying that you are one of the groupie of Apple, you are one of the family of Apple, that particular is called the intangible benefit. So, it is mostly it is a psychological variable, whereas the tangible benefit is a physical variable. The benefit that you can measure, that you can touch, that you can see are the tangible benefits. Right. So, any product then has a number of benefits to offer to the consumers, and so all these taken together, all the benefits that a product has to offer to a consumer can be capped together, can be encapsulated together into a format, and that is called the total product concept. So, any product that consumer actually buys offers a number of benefits to people, and compressing these together into one whole is called the total product concept. So, what is the total product concept? It is a broader view of goods and services as the sum of their benefits, the benefits that these goods and services offer to the people. And so, there are 4 different benefits that people get out of any product. So, let us say if I have a product, any product, let us say if I have a new cell phone. Now, this new cell phone will have 4 different benefits that it can offer people. The central part is called the core benefits. What is the core benefit of a product? The core benefit of the product is the actual benefit that you get of buying a product. So, next time when you buy a camera into the marketplace, the very fact that you can click pictures out of it, beautiful pictures out of it, and can increase its memory, can take different modes of pictures out of it, or can use it for traveling and during traveling and non-traveling, and can a lot of other benefits that you get out of buying a camera or having a camera is called the core benefits. So, all those benefits that a camera can offer, all those benefits that can be measurable and that a camera can offer to a person are called the core benefits. What is the core feature of a camera? Taking pictures. And so, if the camera is offering you the fact or the benefit of taking pictures, beautiful pictures in different format, in different ways, under different lightings, under different conditions, and if it is giving you this chance to carry it to different places and take pictures, because the need that arose for you buying the camera was taking pictures, and if it is satisfying that need in all particular way, it is said to have the core benefit, or said to satisfy the core benefit of people. The second benefit, or the particular thing, benefit that any product has to offer to the people is the something called the accessory benefit. Now, what is the accessory benefit? All those benefits that consumers go ahead and actually derive from a product which is not the core benefit, additional benefits that you derive from the product are called the accessory benefit. For example, things like good showroom, things like happy salesman, things like pleasurable visit to the sales shop, or the sales atmosphere, or all those extra things which are not directly related to the product, but are surrounding the product that you are going to buy are called the accessory benefits. So, those benefits which help you in deciding that particular product or deciding in buying that particular product are called the accessory benefit, or the fact that you have a very good service center, the availability of a service center for a laptop, the availability of a good consumer store where you can for that particular laptop, or a showroom for the laptop where you can go ahead and see various types of or various versions of that laptop which is there with a particular software, without a particular software, with a particular kind of hardware, and so on and so forth, or the kind of service that the particular company provides you, the kind of payment methods that the particular company provides you, the kind of options of buying, for example, whether the company is offering you an EMI, out of an EMI or a card payment, and so many other things. So, this particular feature is not directly related to the product itself, but this is an extra feature of which is associated with the product and which actually makes your buying pleasurable, and these are called the accessory benefits or the accessory ring or accessory benefit ring of a product. The third benefit that you get, a third benefit that a product can give you, is called the psychological benefit. And so, these benefits are derived, are those benefits that people get by buying a particular product and the feeling that gets associated with it. So, by just owning a new Audi, the kind of feeling that it gives to you, the kind of social status you get by owning a Audi itself, the kind of pleasure that you feel, the kind of social elevation that you feel by buying a Audi, or the kind of ego boost that you feel by buying a particular new car or an Audi as a new car, is basically the psychological benefit or psychological ring of benefit that the particular product gives to you. So, it is basically dependent on the consumer's psychology or the consumer's psyche. So, those benefits that the consumer derive by just possessing a product, the feeling that happens by just possessing a product, is called the psychological benefits that a particular product can give you. And the fourth benefit that you can get out of a particular product is called the time dimension or the time benefit. Now, this benefit is not a direct benefit, and so what it does is, time is something which is either increase or decrease when you make a particular purchase. And so, when you buy a particular product, it either engages you in buying it and so eats away your time, or a particular product, buying a particular product decreases your time. So, this increase or decrease of time is another factor which is the benefit that you go out of buying a particular product and not choosing any other product. And so, this time dimension, the time benefit, is very much dependent on different kind of individuals. For example, some people have a lot of time and so they are free to shopping, and so they love spending time. For other people, they are time crunch and so they buy a particular product because it saves their time. And so, as I was saying, the basic core is the bundle of utilitarian benefits that you can purchase out of a product. And so, examples are laptop design, features, memory speed, operating system, install software, and so on and so forth. The second ring or the second type of benefit that you can derive out of a product is basically the added value benefit that we were looking at, the accessory benefit, and these are the store reputation, the manufacturer's prestige, the location, conveyance, salesperson friendliness, and so on and so forth. The third benefit that you can get out of buying a particular product is resulting from consumers' feeling associated with the possession of a particular product, and the examples are sense of belongingness, or feeling thrifty, feeling ahead of the crowd, being a home maker, good homemaker, and so on and so forth. So, it is basically those psychological variables which actually go ahead and help you into buying a product, or the benefit is indirect. And the fourth, as I explained to you, the time dimension. So, perception of time is actually affects your other benefits. For example, how much time are you devoting in buying a particular product? And so, every purchase, either it takes away time or it saves time for you. And so, as I said, this time dimension is something which is not felt by a number of people, not felt by a number of people when making a purchase. So, it is very individualistic, it differs from individual to individual. So, time is another benefit that people can get. For example, eating in a fast food joint saves time, and eating in a restaurant, it takes away time. So, people who feel that they do not have too much time, they prefer eating in a, or at situations, at times people feel that they do not have time, and so they try to eat in a fast food joint which saves time. For example, let us say that I am returning from the present location that I am living in from the city, and mostly it is crowded. So, what I do is, when it becomes evening time, when the rush is too much, traffic rush is too much, when I am trying to eat out, I try to eat out in a fast food restaurant, so that it saves times, and that can be spent into the traffic, so that I can reach home early. But then when it is in the afternoon that I decide to eat out and I have a lot of time, I try to go to a restaurant, because in those cases spending time is okay, because there is no time crunch. And so time, as I said, depends upon individual to individual and situation to situation and person to person. So time is another benefit that is that the product provides to you, or the particular buying of the product provides to you, and so it affects, or it basically decides how you make the particular purchase. So purchasing any product into the from the market is a nice thing, and that offers you a number of benefits, and these benefits are in different for different individuals. But how are the products made into the market? How are the products distributed into the market? And for that, you need to understand something called market segmentation. Now, if a company makes just one product and puts it into the market, nobody is going to buy it. Now, as I said, that people require benefits, right, from a product, and so these benefits are different for different people. Like, take the example of the student buying a watch and the anniversary gift giving person buying a watch. So different people require different benefits from the different products, and that is why there are different products in the market. Now, if there are so many products in the market, how does a consumer, how does a marketer know which product to offer to which consumer? How does he know how which place should he go ahead, and how should he in which market should he push what product, for which person he should put what product? And for that, the simplest thing is to understand the segmentation of the market. So what is the, why is the market segmentation has done? Why is the market divided? The market that you go into is divided into different zones depending on who is buying what. Now, one reason for doing segmenting the market, or in the marketplace that you go is segmented, the one reason for that is because different consumers, they seek different benefits packages in different situations. So first of all, any consumer, the student, when he is buying a watch, at that point of time it is for timekeeping, but the same student after graduating and during a marriage, when he is marrying someone, when he buys a watch, it is not for timekeeping, it is for gift giving, and so the products would be different, the benefits package would be different, and the situations as they vary, the benefit packages are different. And so one good idea of how people make choices, or how people go ahead and purchase items in the market, is understanding the segmentation of the market, or how the market is segmented. So consumers, they usually fall into groups or clusters of individuals seeking similar benefits. Now, when a marketer puts a product into the market, he cannot just make one product. Now, one good example is Henry Ford, Model T car. Now, when Henry Ford started producing the first line of cars in the United States in the early 1900s, he produced something called the Model T, which was a black car, which was a mass market product out there. And so that was what was thrown into the consumer, and the consumer had to buy it. Now, but the thing is, if you just make one product, this is called mass marketing. If you throw into the market, most people will not like it. And so why they don't like it? Because different people have different choices, and so they may not like. And so Henry Ford understood at that very point of time that I have to come up with different types of cars, because different people have different benefits. What he was trying to offer to the market was just one car. Take another example, the case of Levi Strauss, the jeans company. In the 1900s, they were a mass market manufacturer, and they were just making jeans for everyone at the same time. Now, sooner or later, they realized that people were different, and people were with the coming of the new generation, people were looking for different benefits, and they were different kind of people. Even the same person in different situations was looking for different products, and so they took a setback and they changed their product lines, and they came up with newer products, or they stopped doing the mass marketing and bringing up different kinds of jeans. Now they came up with they bought new companies, and they came up with the type of khakis which are there, which are called the lawn pants, and then you have the jeans, the formals, and so on and so forth. And so Levi Strauss learns from that and started making different products, because even the same consumer at different point of time from the same product want different benefits, and so they had to make a new product. Now, this very is the reason why we need to understand what the market is and the segmentation in the market, and that is what it says. So, usually consumers in the market, they fall under different segments based on the benefits that you are looking at. So, segmenting markets, what it actually means is identifying like-minded clusters behaving in similar ways and making similar decisions in the marketplace in similar situations. Now, market segmentation is important because if we consider consumers to be totally varied, each consumer is different from another. If we look at that, that is the extreme end of how a product should be sold in the market. If you look at that, in that case what would happen is we will have to make products for each individual. On the other side, if we do mass marketing, every individual is not same. There is something called in psychology, there is something called individual difference, which is individual differences are in each individual is different from another. So, how does the consumer, how does the marketer who is making a product actually sell his product? For that, he has to understand, he has to make clusters in the market, he has to identify clusters in the market where, which comprise of people who are looking for similar benefits from the product and who are in similar situations. So, those people who actually look at similar benefits or a particular benefit from a product in one situation, the same people can actually look for different benefits in the different situations. So, within situations, how people or different people come under the same umbrella and look for benefits is what market segmentation is all about. Example, let us look at students. Now, all students who are buying a watch, it is believed that they are looking for the time functionality of the watch. But the same student under a different situation, let us say when there is a birthday or where there is a gift giving scenario, when he is giving gift to someone, may require some other functionality from the watch. Or if he decides to go into space tomorrow, or he does he goes into running or athletics, the same watch will be now required not for timekeeping but for some other purpose, or he goes into exploring the world. Now, the same watch will be used for as a chronometer and no more as a simple watch. And so, basically the same consumer under different regions or different situations would differ in their choices or differ in their benefits that they acquire. So, market segmentation is the process through which marketers identify people who are like-minded, who want same kind of benefits and in different situations, so that they can make a product to satisfy that particular segment. Now, in very simple words, what market segment actually means is that identifying people who are like. Once you do that, you will be able to make a product that could satisfy the needs of that particular, not only that particular segment, but other segments also. So, you have to look at all the benefits which are required by different people and how to club them together. Now, the first thing that you should know in market segmentation is that the marketers actually do not segment a market. They do not go and divide the market physically, right. So, what do? They do not create markets, but they find them. And how do they find the markets? There are several companies which actually help marketers in finding markets or finding people who are like-minded together. So, the data of how like-minded people are together or come together for looking for similar benefits can be provided by companies like AC Nielsen, who constantly look at data or purchase data from several shops, and or it could be given by several other companies which are in the business of doing that. So, basically a marketer actually gets this data from these companies who gathers these data from either the points of sales, or it gathers the data from the real market, from market surveys, or so many other things. So, the thing to remember here is that marketers actually do not go into the market and segment them. They take the help of companies who actually have data regarding consumer purchases, regarding consumer needs, and they tell these companies, these marketers, what is the segment which is available and which market they should be functioning into. So, firms help marketers to find and understand market segments. So, basically that is what I was trying to tell you, that how do they find these segments? The segmentation is done by certain firms which are there. For example, market segment occurs in college educations. So, let us say a very simple situation of college education. How do people go to college? Now, there will be within this college education group will be all those students who are college going, and within that there will be several subgroups. So, how do I find or if I am a college, how do I know that what are the segments which are available? So, I go to a company which does that, which collects data from people and gives me that these are. Why it is different? Because college goers are also different. There will be some people who would like to go to a college far off from their place where they have been studying. For other people, they would like to go to a college which is very nearby to their home place. For some people, they would like to go to an arts college. There are some people they would like to go to a science college. For some people, college education is all about going to Ivy League schools. For other people, it is some other schools where they can go to college. For some people, they will go to college which offers a number of courses. Some people will look for colleges which are just offering you basic courses. For example, the applied school. So, some people look for applied school, some people look for theoretical schools, and so on and so forth. So, basically within the college going community itself, the people who go to college, there are several sections, or there are several segments which are out there. And so, companies or colleges who actually want people to apply to them, or students to apply to them, actually take the help of these companies out there, which provide them that how many segments or what are the segments which are available, and based on that they can do the advertisement of their college, that come to me, we offer this, we offer that, and so on and so forth. So, basically that is how segmentation is done, and these are the firms which actually provide you what are the segments which are available. Now, how do we do the market segmentation? How does the process of market segmentation actually takes place? So, there are 3 or 4 steps into it. The first step in dividing a market or segmenting a market starts with something called segment bounding. Now, the first step in segmenting a market, in differentiating a market, in identifying what are the cluster of people which are available, which require similar benefits or which are like-minded under different situations, that requires you to start with something called segment bounding. What is segment bounding? It's a means of differentiating among consumers and among market segments. So, that process of how we differentiate between what a consumer is and what are the consumer segments available, that is called segment bounding. So, how do we bound a consumer to a particular segment? The thing is, the first step that we do is we outlay some number of descriptors which are a combination of characteristics. Now, these descriptors could be in terms of demographics, these descriptors will be in terms of likingness of particular things, it could be in terms of social status, it could be in terms of family income. So, based on that we actually find consumers, and then we actually find markets. So, we look at, for example, let us say that within the college going scenario, there will be consumers or there will be people who can pay high fees and they are looking for good colleges, and there will be consumers who can pay low fees and good colleges. On the other end, there will be colleges which are expecting high fees and looking for those people who can pay high fees. So, basically segment bounding is finding this particular common descriptor, which is the fees that can be paid or the fees that a particular college charges, and based on this descriptor it can now collect people which can pay high fees and low fees and get them associated with higher education. For example, a college could be out there which thinks of charging low fees but gives good quality education, and so what it could do is map this particular college to a particular segment of people who actually can pay low fees but are looking for good quality education. On the other hand, there could be people which pay high fees and they are not looking for that quality of education, they are actually looking at the status of a college, whether it is an Ivy League school or not, and so what happens is that we can actually match these two together, and this is how this segment bounding really happens. So, the first step in segment bounding of relating a particular college or relating a particular segment of people to a particular market segment which is out there is something called segment bounding. The next step is bound segments to a specific geographic location. Next step or the next thing that can happen in segment bounding is we can also do this bound these segments to particular geographic locations. For example, different segment geographic locations are there, and so what we can do is that it could happen that a particular person is looking for good quality education. So, a particular student in the US is looking for good quality education in cheap price, but a college may not be there. So, what these companies do is find a college which is abroad, which is basically looking for lower fees, but giving you a higher education, and this is called global location or bounding to global location. So, it may be possible that in the same area you may not get, in the same market you may not get the appropriate market for a particular kind of a consumer, and so what you tend to do, a particular benefit the consumer is seeking, so you would go global and find consumers for them. And the third thing that happens is time relevance and up to date. So, when I am bounding segments, I should also be, bounding segment also requires you to be up to date with time. When I am bounding segment, when I am finding segments in a market, I should be very sure, or I should be able to predict when this segment will actually be available. I can think about a product which is not there in market, and I am looking for a segment like that. For example, when tablets came in, or netbook PCs came in, the marketers were confused. They didn't have these kind of people. So, a market segment was created, and so people didn't know what a tablet is, what is the use of a tablet, because tablet was between a PC and a smartphone, and so market was created out of it. Or when an Apple Music box was created, now there was no need for this, and so market was created. So, time is also of essence of when the market segment is available or when the market segment will be available. Based on that, the particular bonding of the consumer and the segment can be done. The second thing in market segmentation, so once I have bound a segment to a particular kind of a consumer, a particular market to a particular kind of consumer, the second thing that people who do market segmentation are looking at is the viability of the segment, and this requires, the segment viability requires distinctiveness and sufficient potential to be pursued. The idea is that if a segment is available and if a consumer is available, should that segment be ventured into, and there are 4 different factors, 4 different variables which affect or which decide whether you should venture into a market or not. The first factor is called sufficient size. If a market is available, but the number of consumers is very small, or if a market is very small and the number of consumers is very high, there is a insufficient need. So, let us say I want to float a car which is costing 4 crores. And if I want to bring it to the Indian scenario, then I will have an insufficient size market, because most people in India do not earn that much, are not ready to spend that much, and so this is not the sufficient size. So, one of the things that in segmentation you have to look at is whether the segment that you are looking at, whether the number of people that you are looking at are sufficient in size, so that companies can derive profit out of it. So, if you come to an Indian market, you are coming with a 4 crore or 6 crore car, you are not going to get benefit. Of course, some people will buy it, but you cannot buy a car. So, I can think of a redesigned version of the car which is lower in price, lower in things, but people feeling it, and that is why the Audi, as it says, the company came up with the Q series of cars for the Indian sector, not the one that people can buy and can still have the feeling of buying an Audi or riding an Audi, but it does not give that much of a price. The second thing is measurability. The second thing that marketers look at in market segmentation is how, if I can measure the particular market. If I cannot measure the market is too distributed, if the market is too wide, if it is all over the place, all over geographic locations, I cannot basically measure the market, and in those cases what will happen is that segment viability, or basically looking at segmenting the market, is not a good exercise. The third is clearly differentiated. If I have markets which are overlapping each other, which basically means that there could be a particular market, there could be a particular kind of consumer which is interested in one particular product, but is also interested in some other particular product, or if the differentiation between 2 markets are not there. So, food and drinks market, for example. Now, food and drink markets, the food and drinks, the consumables, the chips and the Coca-Cola or the soft drink, they go together, and so there is no clear line of differentiation between it, because they go together. So, if I do not have a clear distinction of where the market boundaries are, or where one boundary, one segment ends and the other segment starts, I will not go into this market, or marketers will not go into selecting that market. And the fourth thing is reachable. If a market I have identified cannot be reached, for example, I am a company which manufactures good car and I want to send it to Ethiopia. Now, there is no way to reach Ethiopia or the population of Ethiopia and send my products at lower price so that I can earn profit for it. So, if a market is not reachable, if you cannot reach that particular market, then there is no point in looking at that segmentation or doing that particular kind of segmentation. And the third thing that I need to do when I am looking at market segmentation, when I am doing market segmentation, or when marketers do market segmentation, is the strategies that they use. The another important thing is the strategies that they use in marketing. The first kind of strategies that consumers tend to do is something called mass marketing or undifferentiated marketing. So, within segments, there are certain segments where I can do mass marketing, or for example, there are certain products for which I can do mass marketing. For let's look at a low involvement product called salt. Now, when I am trying to sell salt, I can do mass marketing because no matter which segment I go to of consumers, I can sell the salt. There is no distinctions in salt, or when I am selling phenyl. Now, that is a mass marketed thing, and so, or I am selling for for your cars, if I am selling mobile oil. Now, when I am doing that, it's a mass market product in the sense that people don't look at variations. So, the one of the important strategies that marketers use across market segmentation within different segments is called market segmentation. So, when it's a low involvement product or a low interest product to people, marketers generally go for something called market segmentation. And one strategy of pushing products into the market is mass marketing, where this product is same for across all segments. The second kind of marketing strategy that marketers use across segments is something called concentrated marketing, also known as focused or niche marketing. Here what happens is I make different products for different segments. For example, let's look at the car market. Now, I have a car which is for the lower economic group people. So, if Maruti is the company who is segmenting the market, who is looking at the segments of the market, now I will make a car which satisfies the lower income group people. So, I have something called the Alto. On the other hand, I have a high classic car for the upper segment. Of course, Maruti is not one of those companies which actually sells cars for the higher segment, but coming up with the idea of a Nexa brand, it tries to push itself into the higher end market, or trying to compete with higher end cars. So, on the other end, I have cars like Baleno, or I have other cars which are higher and which tends to offer more to consumers who can pay more. So, when I am doing a market segmentation, or when I am looking at markets, different markets, and doing concentrated marketing, what I am actually doing is I am trying to make different products for different market. And so, here the marketing that I am doing is something called concentrated market. Now, or it's called niche marketing. Now, in these days, in the newer century, there is something called product for one or market for one, which has come up, a new thing, where what happens is the marketers are actually targeting one person. So, it is called private marketing or individual marketing. Now, what would be an example? A good example here is, let's say, clothing. Now, there are certain companies in the US which actually offer you clothing which is designed just for you. So, consumers, they have to go into the market, or they have to go into the storeroom of that particular cloth company. What happens is there are a set of lasers which measures your size, and based on your sizes, it manufactures cloth just for you. And so, this is called the concentrated marketing. What I am trying to do is I have segmented market into different sections, and so what after that I have provided different markets or different kind of products to different markets to satisfy every segment and every consumer, to satisfy the benefit of or provide the benefit to different segments and different consumers. And then there is something called differentiated marketing. In differentiated marketing, again, it's kind of clear distinction between the high and the low market. So, if I am a company which is just looking for high end consumers, now I am doing differentiated marketing. For example, if I am let's say BMW. Now, if I am BMW, I do not care for those consumers which cannot pay less than let's say 1 crore. Now, when I am doing that, I am doing a differentiated marketing, because I am targeting only one market, which is the high consumer product. Or I could be a product manufacturer which is just targeting the lower market. I am just manufacturing things for the lower market, and this is called differentiated marketing. And in addition to that, there is something called counter segmentation also. This is also a segmentation strategy. Now in this segmentation strategy, what really happens is marketers actually go ahead and reduce the number of markets. So one strategy which is counter to the strategy that I have explained before in consumer behavior or in identifying consumers into the market is called counter segmentation. In this, what marketers actually do is they reduce the number of market segments which is served, and in that way they retain more people. So they say that I pull up, so some company comes in and says that although I had 4 or 5 different products serving different consumers, now what I have done is I have reduced 3 products and I am only looking at the 2 products so that I can offer them benefit. And so this is called the counter segmentation strategy for marketing. Now in the next class, what we will do is we will go ahead and take this further and understand how the consumers, once a market is decided, once a particular product has been chosen, or once a particular kind of benefit is expected out of a product, how does consumer actually go into the market and decides of what to buy and what to not buy. So this decision process that the consumer takes in buying a particular product is what we are going to look at in the next class. And in addition to that, we'll also look at how do consumers research is carried out. What is the process or what is the methodology which is used by marketers for doing consumer research, gathering data from consumers and doing this segmentation of market or identifying what a market is, and providing or basically matching the consumer with the product, matching the consumer with the kind of product which is there, and how they make the match between the benefit it sought and the benefit that the product is going to give you. So in the next class we will dwell into these topics. Thank you.